All praises to the Most High God of Israel. It's a blessing to come before you this evening. My name is VCE Smith, and I am the rib of the Watchman. Tonight, class, we're going to get right into our lesson. And tonight we're going to deal with something that I guess the Father feels you need to hear, because this is what He told me to bring you. Where we live at now, the place that we're in, this place is a wicked place. We know that. Not even with the Father having to express to us the wickedness of this place. But a lot of the wickedness of this place is due to the thinking and the thoughts and the imagination of the creatures, because they are the things that creepeth on the face of the earth. They're cattle. Their thinking is not like God's. It's not like man. It's not like, they call them mankind, that they call themselves mankind. And, that's true. They're kind of like man. Everything about them is similar to you, it seems like. But that's the suit that they wear down here on this planet. And it's not like you. It's nothing like you. But it looks like you. But we're going to deal with this imagination thing tonight. And what we want to talk about is how our imaginations have taken us places that we should not go, Israel. Our imaginations, they're evil. They're very evil. They're wicked. And nobody teaches you this. I mean, even when you're a little kid coming up, I know I heard it when I was a kid coming up. We were told all the time to use your imagination. You got to use your imagination and think of things and go places in your mind that you've never been, and imagine yourself there and this and that. But we're going to look at what the Father says about the imagination, and we're going to go from there. Let's get started. Because, I don't want to be before you too long. And anything that I don't read, you go read it for your own self. Because I don't hold hands, and I don't do all that. Because when I bring it to you, I bring it to you just like the Father brought it to me. And if I can understand it, if you're Hebrew, you can understand it. Now, let's go here to Genesis 6 is where we're going to start. Let's see let's start at verse 1. And we're going to look at, now some of this is related to, but I'm going to read it all. But we're going to deal with the main part that I think is verse 5 and 6 and whatever. We're going to read with that. But we're not getting into the creation of all the different types of kinds and whatever. But we're going to say this because we're going to lead into what we're going to be teaching. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. Now, it's another word that we are all screwed up in the New Egypt on. Fair does not mean white. Fair does not mean, as they say, lily white. Fair means attractive. The sons of God saw these women and they thought they were attractive. And they took them wives of all which they chose. So when they came down, they said, you and you and you. I like, oh, look at that one. Oh, I want that one. You, and so on and so on. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Now, when God said his spirit shall not always, I'm not going to get into this. This is not the teaching, but I will explain this as I go. When the Father said his spirit shall not always strive with man, when the sons of God came down and they made it with the daughters of men, they created a different creation. So once that creation was made, the Spirit of God no longer dwelled in those women. So those women could not produce the children that had the Spirit of God in them. And that's the breath of life. When God created man, not cattle. When he created man, they have life in them, but they don't have the breath of life breathed into them, because that when God breathed that breath of life into you, you received a soul. long story, but y'all know what I'm talking about. And I don't want to get into that because that's just a part of what we're dealing with. But anyway, once you do that, once you change what God has made and you make something else, that's why when cattle and man come together, they create something different and the Spirit of God no longer dwells in it. Anyway, let's keep on going. It says, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days. Of course, we do know there were giants because the Egyptians, as evil as they were, they made statues and when you look at some of those photographs, you see how big everything was and how high. Look at the pyramids and all these different things. So you know that there were giants. They even have now discovered bones of the giants. So we know that there were giants in the land in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So they made something, they created something that was mighty and strong and big, whatever, just like that, but it was not of God, because this is not what God created. Let's get into verse 5. Now, verse 5 is going to be dealing with more of what, this is how we're going to find out about all this imagination. Because see, once you create something different, once something else is made, now it has its own mind and thinking, not the mind of God, not the way God intended for things to be, but we're going to deal with this imagination thing that everybody talks about. Even, in school, you see when the kids walk in, they have an imagination board now. Use your imagination. Well, let's look at this thing. And in verse 5, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So everybody that was down there now, because you've got all this stuff made, you got all these, you start making all these different people that, or some aren't even people, but you keep creating all these different beings and different things that God didn't make, and now we've got all this evil imagination in the world. Because you have to also understand, you've seen the things that cattle can do. You've seen the thoughts of cattle. The thoughts of cattle is evil 24/7. They just had a funeral for 5 of them, and they made this thing where they now interrupt television and put it on TV and for the world to see. And I mean, their imaginations are horrible. For one action, there's a reaction. For the whole time that people of color were quiet and they weren't bringing out their cordboard guns, everything was fine. But then from the actions of 2 murderers and their imagination of killing black people, now the imagination of people of color, I'm gonna kill some of y'all. So 2 for 5 is pretty even. I guess that it wasn't enough, but hey, that's how it is, and that's the way it works. We got what we could get, because people are tired. People sit around thinking of these things, and now their imagination's running wild with them. This is what I want to do, and whether it's what God wants you to do or not, God's in control. He is in control. So the mind and the imagination that it is the heart, and imagination and the heart are hooked together. They are continually evil. Now, in verse 6, God says, and it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. So God was upset. I done went and done all this. I have made all this, because anything that comes from God is great. I have made all this greatness and put things down here like I wanted them to be. And along come the sons of God, and they start this mess by going down there with the women of men and creating something that I did not create. So now we got another type of imagination in the world. But we're going to deal with you, Israel, and we're going to deal with, but that's just a start. That's the foundation of letting you see how God feels about imagination. Well, let's go to Deuteronomy 29. And I guess we'll start at verse 16. Yeah, let's start at verse 16. For ye know how we have dwelt in the land of Egypt. Now this is talking about, well, back in the old story, let me make sure that everybody's on same accord. That was dealing with Noah and God destroying all that he had created and keeping a few and then putting him on an ark and them and a few of them and taking them off and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so everybody knows what I'm talking about when I'm dealing with Genesis 6. Now we come up here to Deuteronomy 29. For ye know how we have dwelt in the land of Egypt, and how we came through the nations which ye passed by. Now we're dealing with how God is explaining to Israel how they saw the imagination, the wickedness of these other nations when I brought you through out of Egypt. Okay? It says, ye have seen their abominations and their idols. Y'all know what y'all see here? This land is the land of idolatry. Every single thing you see is idolatrous. You go in the store. Look in the yards. I mean, you can't ride through your neighborhood. Somebody got a statue of this and an angel and of this. I don't even know what the angel looks like, but they call it an angel. They done put a person with wings on it. I mean, all kind of crazy things. You see these people with all these crosses hanging on their necks and all this, just foolishness, all this idolatry. Well, when Israel passed through, God took them through where every nation looked upon them and saw the greatness of God. They also saw the wickedness of those other nations. So God is telling them and reminding them of what they saw. And ye have seen their abominations and their idols, wood and stone, silver and gold, which were among them. Let's go down here to 18. Lest there should be among you man or woman or family or tribe whose heart turneth away this day from the Lord our God to go and serve the gods of these nations, lest there should be among you a root that breatheth guile and wormwood. And it came to pass, when he heareth the words of this curse, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, now listen, God has shown you all this, God has told you all this, but you're going to turn around and say, here it comes. But this, what are we teaching on? This wicked imagination. 19, and it came to pass, when he heareth the words of this curse, that he bless himself in his heart, saying, I shall have peace, though I am in my heart, add drunkenness to thirst. In other words, I'll do what I'm going to do. I'm my own man. I'm my own person. I'm going to have peace. And see, you don't tell nobody that they're going to have peace. You don't say it in your own heart that you're going to have peace. You don't know what you're going to wake up to the next day. You don't know what God has in planned for you or somebody else. That's why I hate it. When I go to the grocery store and I'm checking out, have a blessed day. Have a blessed... Motherfucker, fuck you. You ain't God. You haven't been up in his throne room and seen his list of what he has prepared for a person to have that day. Who are you? You don't even know who you talking to. God damn it, I could be somebody planning on killing your entire family. And you going to sit up and tell me, have a blessed day.